and welcome to Angel Heart Radio. I'm your host, Annette McCoy, and with me today, as usual at this time of the month, Janet Hickox. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Annette, and I'm so glad to be here.
It's always fun, isn't it? And I'm especially I'm very excited about today. I think, Mad March. Oh my goodness.
It almost, like I said, leaves you breathless thinking about, from my astrological point of view, I is extremely activated this month. And that kind of activation means lots of things going on in people's lives, a lot of opportunities for people to, take the next steps in their lives, but also the opportunity for a lot of people to feel like, what just happened? Why is this happening?
Well, I'm always fascinated with what you have to tell us because, yes, you watch the stars, so to speak, and use them as your guide, and you were saying just before we came on air that when you prepared when you were looking at 2023 back in November, it was like, oh my goodness, March. So you could see back then that March was going to bring interesting times.
And the thing that was really interesting about it is that it was also very obvious that February was going to be that space in between, right? January was kind of busy. There was flutterings of things going on there. But February, I mean, of course, it wasn't without any kind of transits or anything. It just wasn't the level of transits that we're going to see for March. So I was like, everybody take some breaths in February because you're going to need your running shoes when you get to March. And here we are. It's March. Today is March 1st. My time, March 1st.
That's right. And for me, we're into the second day. So,
yeah, that just blows me away, right? Time traveling. I'm now in your time zone on March 2nd, but I'm still sitting physically in March 1st.
Yes.
Weird. That's weird.
It is. This planet. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So much going on.
So what makes you say Mad March?
Is that the word I used? I'm surprised because I don't. That's a good description of March. It's not mad like angry, but mad like crazy, like kind of crazy making. Right. And it started out on today for us, so yesterday for you, with Venus in a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, planets, when they come into conjunction with each other, kind of start a new cycle together. Now, here's the good news about that Venus and Jupiter are both what we call benefic planets. They do good things for us, or they bring us love, good luck, fortune. It's the Venus is the planet of love. So, the two of these planets coming together on the 1st of the month really made me feel like, wow, okay, it sets the tone. It sets the tone of goodness, of optimism, of love, of relationship, of self-worth and value, and any other host of words that I can throw out there. But the key to the month isn't in that this is the day that this happens. It's, can we hold on to that feeling, that goodness, that positiveness, that optimism throughout the month of March that is likely going to test us in many ways. That's the key. If you can hold on to that, then the month is a breeze, right? It's a breeze. You'll be looking through rose-colored glasses the whole month going, oh, I'm in my Venus conjunct Jupiter mode. But
that's great because let's face it, ideally, that's the way we can all look at life.
Right. We have the choice. I guess that's, the thing that is really important. We have the choice about how we are going to look at or embrace what comes next. And what comes next is a lot. There's a lot, right? We've just talked about one day. Your day today sees Mercury in a conjunction with Saturn. Now, that is again a conjunction. We're bringing together the energies of two planets. And, the Venus conjunct Jupiter and Mercury conjunct Saturn. These are inner planets that are coming into contact with the societal planets or the cultural planets or the transpersonal planets. And so it's our part, our function, our role that we're playing in the greater society or greater community. That is what's most important for us to think about. And when Mercury comes together with Saturn, it's about being able to use your mind and think clearly and see things in a very focused or concentrated sort of way. And it's a very beneficial for getting work done. And, remember, did we talk about this last month? Yeah. This isn't our first meeting. No, we met in February.
That's right.
We were talking about how all the planets were in forward motion. So it was time for us to take steps, to take action, and not just leave everything up here in the mind or in the imagination, but to really take steps to move forward without your 3D feet on the ground, taking steps, nothing new would take place. And here we have this very powerful focusing energy, which of course happened earlier in the day or will happen in our early of the day tomorrow. Oh Lord. And then Mercury, because that conjunction with Saturn was actually happening in Aquarius. So Aquarius is an energy, air energy. It's about the mind. So the mind is working really well. But then Mercury immediately leaves Aquarius and goes on into Pisces. Totally different story, right? So we go from this ability to have focus and concentration to Mercury's move into Pisces that kind of blurs it all up, blurs the lines, like the little lights in the background of your background, they're kind of blurred, right? It makes things hard to dial in and focus. It also adds an element of emotionalism to everything. So our words become more dramatic, or our feelings are kind of out on our sleeve, which means they're coming through what we communicate. So it's an interesting thing to have, this very powerful focus energy and let's get the job done, followed by Mercury moving into a sign that's like, yeah, let's just, let all the boundaries go. We don't need to think about that. But that's kind of what I'm talking about with this month. It's almost like we're going back and forth into these different energies, and it can feel very disconcerting. So you got to hold on to something, hold on to optimism, right? Hold on to beauty and love and relationship. Hold on to being able to think deliberately, right? Being able to move through things, in a stepwise sort of way. Then as we move into next week is, real fun really begins next week, I think. We have the sun coming into a sextile, which again, words that join planets are really just about the relationship between the two planets. And the sun in a sextile to Uranus is a sort of good working relationship between the two, right? The sun's emphasis on personality and achievement and brilliance and living out your highest, aspirations. And Uranus, that is also about liberation and freedom and letting you loose a little bit, right? Letting go of some of the stringent holds. So they're working really well together. And I think it's a great way to set the tone for that week. So that would be March 6th. My March 6th would be your March 7th. And it is a really good way, I think, for us to look at the things that come next, right? It's inspirational. We can become inspired. So it's like we start this week, the first week in March, with the Jupiter conjunct Venus or Venus conjunct Jupiter, and then the next week we go into the sun in the sextile to Uranus. So the week's beginnings kind of set the tone, right, for excitement even, or sort of the freedom loving sort of energies. And then on the next day, we have the full moon. And the full moon occurs at my time, 4:41 a.m. on the 7th. Likely that's going to be on the 8th year time.
Right.
I
Mhm.
can't even tell you what time that might be. Time. Guessing would be totally incorrect. But then just an hour later, Saturn moves out of Aquarius and into Pisces. And that's the one of the big harbingers of change for 2023, along with the fact that later in the month, Pluto is going to change signs. So if we look now at what Saturn's change of signs brings to us on a full moon day, full moon is funny because the moon itself will be shown with that. If you look at a chart for that full moon, it shows Saturn at the last degree, 29 degrees, like 57 minutes of Aquarius. It hasn't quite made the move. So we're still hanging around a little bit, having to work through some of the Saturn and Aquarius energies that we've been working through. How do we embrace technology? How do we embrace the light and walk knowing the dark also is there with technology? What is the dark side of technology? Um, Looking for the future. How did we set ourselves up? What's the foundation that we have enabled that is it going to enable us to be in the now for sure, but to look forward, right? To see how do we take the best of the past and marry it to the best of the future? So a lot of that, coming up in that full moon, and then Saturn changes signs. Now the maps are no longer going to apply, right? All the maps that we've made of our lives, our trajectories, everything no longer applies. And that's because Saturn, well, let's look at it this way. Saturn at one point was the furthest planet in the known universe that we could see, right? There
Right.
wasn't, to our ancestors, there wasn't a Uranus, there wasn't a Neptune, there wasn't a Pluto, right? They just couldn't see beyond Saturn. So Saturn really represented the furthest limits of our known universe. And so the planet Saturn comes to represent limits and borders or boundaries. And you're now you're moving the planet of boundaries and limits and the outer edges of the universe into a sign that knows no boundaries.
Right.
Pisces, they all come undone, right? All the boundaries are undone. And that means we're dissolving the old boundaries. But in the process, we've also got to prepare new ones. And we've also got to look at what are inappropriate boundaries. Uh, what kind of boundaries do we have that have become a tool of separation? I was listening to a talk from another astrologer this weekend, and he very clearly was talking about how back in 1993 to 95, that Saturn was in Pisces, and that was the time when Ronald Reagan told Gorbachev to bring down the Berlin Wall, right? That famous bring it down or,
Mm.
break it, blow it up, whatever words he used was essentially what Gorbachev did, right? He destroyed the wall, which was a boundary, an inappropriate boundary between two parts of one country. What the heck, right? It was about walls dissolving or those boundaries dissolving. Well, now in this country, we have a wall somewhat built along the southern border between us and Mexico. That's going to come up again, right? The appropriateness or inappropriateness of that type of boundary, that type of wall. Is it a tool of separation? Is it based on fear? Because if it's based
Mm.
on fear, it isn't going to last, right? It just can't. So there's a redefining going on with Saturn's move into Pisces. Building emotional intelligence, perhaps even during this period of time, this next 2.5 years, because the psychic sensitivity, emotional sensitivity of Pisces is now being given maybe new boundaries by Saturn, right? Saturn likes boundaries. He likes everything in its right and perfect place. So are we having to really learn lessons around where emotions, the right use of emotional energy instead of being vomited onto other people when you're mad or when you're having a tirade, being able to rein it in and hold it and understand that it's yours, right? And not somebody else's. And that's going to be a big theme for these, next couple of years. Um,
Janet, does that, when you were talking there about boundaries and barriers,
Mhm.
is this an opportunity for us to look at our own personal boundaries? And yes, have we boundaries in place that suit us? I know some of us find it very difficult to say no when we're asked to do something by someone else. And yet
Yep.
it's really important to look at ourselves and go, well, okay, where does this sit for me? Am I able to do it, or am I giving too much of myself and running
Mhm.
myself thin?
Yeah. So remember that boundaries is going to be a big word for everybody. It's going to be a buzzword. Some
Right.
people bore boundaries, right? And they're just all over the place all the time. They're going to have difficulty because Saturn is going to require them to rein it in somewhat. And then there
Mm-hmm.
are the others, other people who have all of these very stringent boundaries. Well, they're
Mm-hmm.
also going to come into difficulty because of the dissolving nature of Pisces, dissolving, blurring those lines. Um, so we're all going to be dealing with it in some way, shape, or form, whether you're dealing with it because you've been too boundaried or because you have had a time in your life of boundarylessness. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a new game for 2.5 years now of this. Now, it also affects religion because Pisces rules the Christian religion, right? So if we're looking at religion, it's not really going to be about the other religions so much as it's going to be about Christianity and redefining what that means. What is, I hear it all the time over the last few weeks, especially about church memberships falling and attendance falling and all of this kind of thing. At our Super Bowl this year, there
Mm-hmm.
was an actual commercial. You know how the Super Bowl for us in the US is always about the commercials plus the game plus the halftime show, right? There were actually commercials with Jesus in the commercial, right? And it was like geez us, the us part, right? He is us and we are, and it was just a different kind of appeal, I think, to people to become more spiritual, but it was definitely leaning toward religion, right? It was definitely leaning toward religion. So there's a new a possibility that our relationship to religion and to spirituality starts to blur up, right? That whole thing blurring. Um, Saturn is always about limits because he was the outer limit of our experience, in being able to gaze up at the stars. We're exploring beyond the outer edges of things. So we may have people pushing boundaries, pushing limits. And I was reflecting on that when we take a look at what has always been accepted in terms of this is one subject, etiquette, right? And how
Mm-hmm.
we worked with one another in the context of government or, in the context of politics and diplomacy and all of that. And already people are saying things that I would never in a million years have thought that they would say about another person to their face or, you know, it just makes me go, "Ugh." I mean, it maybe, that we're losing our ability to be tactful, to be diplomatic. And that's going to be something that we're also going to be looking at. What is that a pattern that we really want to blur the lines on? You know, is it okay to yell out at the president of the United States, "You're a liar"? Doesn't matter if he is or isn't, but fact is, it's like the lines are blurred in that respect. Most
Mm-hmm.
people would never ever do that, but now suddenly even members of the government themselves are yelling these things out at each other and you just have to go, where's the decency, right? But that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be something also that we're dealing with. And here's something else. We're also going to all have to deal with our habitual patterns, right? All of the things that we've always, done, the routines, the order, it's undone, right? Come undone. Like,
And
why
that's
do I
why you
do it?
test a lot of people. May I welcome Rhonda to the show? It's always lovely to see Londa, isn't it?
Hello, Londa. I thought you said Rhonda, and I was like,
I
Rhonda.
did. I realized the first time yes, at this Londa.
But you meant Londa. Hello, Londa. It's good to have you with us. Yeah, so we're going to be looking at all of our habits.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Good, bad, indifferent. I don't know. Inhibitions. Saturn holds us to that proper etiquette. It holds us within the lines. It holds us to what is right, to what is decent, to what is authentic, right? That's his gig, right? But now all of those worst impulses that we have are coming up, right? People saying or doing things we would never have expected. So the worst of, initially at least, what we may see is the worst of the um, lowering of our inhibitions coming out. But here's another word that I'm going to throw out. It's a Piscean word, and maybe possible with Saturn is reconciliation. I love this word. Neptune in Pisces, redemption. Saturn in Pisces, reconciliation. They're kind of, words that we can look to for healing and for connectedness and to help us deal with the wounds that are created by some of the loosing of the inhibitions that are likely to happen or be more profound, right? More profound. There's one wall that we have to break through, all of us, and that's the wall of fear. And that's, I think, the primary experience of Saturn in Pisces is going to bring that one to our forefront, breaking down that wall. And our perception of what does that mean? What was the wall there for? So fear is the big wall. And then the opportunity for us is to be able to choose from the old stories, old way, the old tired way of being, and the creation of new myths, new stories, triumphant, optimistic stories. So that one little day is a huge day. And we may also have to face in the fact that it's a full moon, some of the things we have to release in order to be able to move in that direction. Now, those things are not all, that's the day it happens, but it's going to take time for those things to be revealed. But you can always tell. There's always a tell. Like when a planet makes a sign change, there's signs around you of what's to come, right? In the news, perhaps, or in how you're feeling, and subjects that that are suddenly coming up, to your mind. So watch around the 7th. That's a big day, a big, big day. Now, luckily, Saturn immediately moves into a sign or to a gate in human design that I absolutely love. And it's the gate 55, which is about abundance. And in Gene Keys, we talk about this as freedom, and it's freedom from victimization thinking or fear, right? Freedom from fear and the shadows. So to me, that's the big hallmark of the whole entire transit, with this idea of releasing ourselves from victimizing energy, being victims, being the victimizers, allowing fear to cause us to be in victimhood or to, take advantage of other people and be their victimizers. So it's a huge change, I think, in the landscape. And then something else that is occurring that same at the end or the beginning of the next week is Jupiter coming into a connection with Chiron. Now, Chiron is the myth of the wounded healer. So he really represents, he's half horse and he's half human. So he's got his animal instincts and he's got his human instincts. And it is the healing path, right? That these two come together. Jupiter represents growth and expansion and the evolution of consciousness. So we're becoming more conscious about our healing path. And it's the first time Jupiter and Chiron have been in a conjunction for 13 years. And they're conjuncting in a sign, right? Yeah, 13, right? The lucky 13. But it's conjuncting in a sign that is all about new beginnings. Aries, right? Aries, new beginnings. And there's this whole mythology. That's a whole longer story I could go into, but there's so many other things to talk about.
Well, I just see March is obviously a huge opportunity for
Mhm.
us to look at how we are looking at life, how we're are we fearful or are we optimistic?
Mhm. Yeah. Are we fearful? Are we codependent in some really
That's a
powerfully
big one.
negative ways? And we would have to release ourselves from that, right? Because this is would be a sign that would teach us about interdependence, how we are all here to work together. The other thing about it is Chiron in Aries has a lot to do with our identity, our self-identity. Who are we? Who am I? And and am I projecting outward a legitimate image of my self-worth and of my value, of my I am presence? Or am I trying to be something I'm not? Am I caught up in what other people believe that I should be? So there's a lot of healing that can go around with this. But it's, first time in 13 years. Okay, I think we should pay attention.
Mhm.
Pay attention. And because it's in the first sign of the zodiac, Aries, it brings even more attention to it because what's going to happen later this month is the spring fall equinox, which happens at 0 Aries. We have Jupiter in Aries, we have Chiron in Aries, we're going to have the sun in Aries, and Mercury will also be in Aries just after that. So it brings to mind the seeds that we need to plant to bring ourselves into real alignment with responsibility, with truth, and with really understanding how we're all responsible for everything that's happening on the planet, right? You may not be the shooter in a situation, but in some ways we've created the path for that to happen, for that experience. It's a teaching mechanism, even in some ways. What are we learning from those kinds of experiences? But also from the good experiences. What's positively moving us forward? Where are we boldly and courageously taking steps to be different? Stand in our power, to stand in our, the word grace came to mind, standing in our grace,
Mhm.
right? It's huge, 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 huge theme. And that starts what is likely one of the most crazy weeks of the entire year, because after that, we have Mars in a square to Neptune. And then we have the sun in a conjunction to Neptune. And then we have, I mean, literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more aspects between planets that week.
Wow.
It's amazing. And these are crazy making because sometimes one is pointing you in one direction while the other one is pointing you in a different direction, right?
Mhm.
So for example, Mars squaring Neptune would be all about a challenge it is to be the embodied human, right? To really be the divine in a human form and to act from that place, act from what Jesus would said, do unto others, right? Or so, the whole idea of treating others the way you would want to be treated, walking your
Mhm.
talk, right? That comes to mind. And then the sun conjuncts Neptune. And the sun is all about the power of your personality and aligning your personality then and what you do in the world with with unconditional love, with higher spiritual concepts. Again, kind of walking your talk. But these are the two most powerful action-oriented planets that are conjunct and square Neptune, right? The sun and Mars. So it's taking action. Like I said, it's walking your talk,
Mhm.
not just sitting
It's
back
really,
talking about it.
I know it's very easy to talk. I can wax lyrical all the time. Putting those thoughts into action, that's the challenging part.
That is definitely the challenging part, right? Um, and I've even been noting in my own life over the past several days, actually, maybe even the last couple of weeks, where I am sort of in this process of calling myself on my own stuff, right? It's like,
Mm,
okay, right, this has happened, and I feel that emotional reaction coming up, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, call it back in,
mm, mhm.
right? It's not the outer world that's causing this chaos. It's your emotion, your reaction, your response to it that is creating the chaos. So that's been a big change for, I talk about that all the time, but now I'm actually having to live it out, right?
Yes.
Walking the
Well,
talk.
when something unexpected happens, ah, technol technologically,
It's always my Achilles heel. It's always going to be the trigger.
and it's like, okay, I have a choice. Do I fly off the handle or do I take that breath and be a little calmer in my response?
Calmer and kinder, right? Calmer and kinder. There's that. And it is, that's so minor in the bigger scale of things. I mean, there are bigger things that happen that we are very, reactionary to, right?
Mm,
Losing a job or not getting the job that you wanted or having a health crisis. There are big things, right? Betrayal by friends or other people that you trusted. And those are big issues. And they do create a path of emotional destruction, right? If we respond the way that we are feeling in that moment without really settling ourselves first and then choosing what happens next, we can be reacting to all kinds of things in our lives on and on. So these are lessons that we're also learning in the context of Piscean energy. And the
mhm.
sun at that point is still in Pisces, right? Conjunct Neptune in Pisces. Mars in Gemini squaring Neptune in Pisces. Mars in Gemini having, you know, communication in the mind that needs to be aligned with spiritual concepts and all that. So lots going on there. But then the next day, Thursday, the 16th, which would be probably your 17th, right? That's a
Right.
day where Mercury conjuncts Neptune. We've had the sun in the conjunction and we've had Mars in the square. Now we get Mercury involved. Then the sun comes into a square with Mars, who was just in the square with Neptune.
Mm, mm.
There's some redundancy going on here. And then we have Venus in a square to Pluto and Mercury in a square to Mars. I don't even know how to tell you what that brings that day, but just know there's a lot of whiplashing potential going
Mm.
on, as you're running into the challenges to walk your talk, stay in that peaceful place, to be remaining emotionally intelligent, right? We're getting struck. Boom, there it comes, right? Here's your opportunity to test your new skills. Let's see how you
Oh,
do.
wow.
Yeah.
And
That
that's
same
St.
day, Venus,
Patrick's Day here.
yeah, it will be the 16th, 17th, which,
Yeah.
whatever hemisphere you're living in, whatever time zone around the world. Venus also moves into Taurus that day. She's the gentling of that day. If there's ever anything that's the gentling, what time of the day? She moves in at 3:34 p.m. Yikes. Well, at the end of the day, we may gentle up toward the end of the day because Venus is in her own rulership when she moves into Taurus. She's sensual here. She's loving here. She's affectionate here. So I think that is a big gentling of some of the more crazy energies of that particular day. But again, it goes into the next day as well, right? With the Mercury conjuncting the sun, right? That tells us we're halfway through the Mercury cycle with the sun and we're headed toward the next retrograde. Venus in a sextile to Saturn, again, positive. These are positive transits. But they also point us to new energies, new information, new ways of showing love, um, kind of, stretching out of the I'm self-contained and I need no one
Yeah.
to I'm open and I'm, going to be a part of everything. So that's an interesting day as well. And then the next day, the 18th, my 18th, your 19th, Mercury moves into Aries, right? Mercury was in a conjunction to the sun at one of the last couple of degrees of Pisces, and then he moves into Aries. Now, this is the act first, think later kind of energy that happens, right? Mercury rules the mind. In an Aries, he comes off as, moving quickly from one thought to another, from one activity to another. Maybe even what we need to think about and slow down ourselves a little bit during that time, the next couple of weeks while Mercury is in Aries, because we will be very tempted to act first, think later. That doesn't always work out well, right? It's the corollary of think first, act next, or
Uh,
think
and
before you leave.
that's, yeah, sometimes it's really easy to forget that, isn't it?
Yeah.
To jump in with a response to jump in with a reaction rather than thinking first.
Yeah. And when you think about just the sheer number of things that have gone on that week before that conjunction or before Mercury moves into Aries, there might be a lot of frustration that's simmering, and people may be primed to jump at opportunities or to jump down, somebody's throat
Mm,
that says something wrong to them.
mm.
It can be a very volatile energy ending the week with so many other transits going on. So everybody be cool, calm, collected before you speak. Think before you act and do something that likely you might regret later. So that's about the only thing I can say about that week, right? Be be kind, be kind to others, right? Treat others the way you would want to be treated. There's always that. Primarily that it's not that it's a bad week, it's just there's so much going on that it can leave us feeling
Mm.
like
Yeah.
gobsmacked. Whoa, what's going on? Reverberating back and forth, like watching a tennis match, with
Yeah.
ball in your court, go your court, your court, your court, back and forth. So craziness, right? The following week, then we move the sun into the sign of Aries. 0 degrees Aries is the cosmic or astrological new year. So it's the true new year in sense that 0 Aries is the beginning of the zodiac. So it represents that time where everything comes into newness. At least in the northern hemisphere, it's the time of spring. So it kind of goes along with spring. In your hemisphere, it's the first day of fall, or you're going into the autumn season. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
different story there, but it's still a new beginning, right? The new beginning holds sway either place because it's still the sun moving into Aries, right? That's what it represents. And that day, the sun actually comes into a pretty interesting connection to the planet Pluto, at sextile. So it's a positive expression of transformational energy. So I think the spring fall equinox, let's say, is holding the possibility for a lot of change, right? For us to transform ourselves, the situations we find ourselves in, life in general. There's a lot of transformational energy. And then the very next day is the new moon, and the new moon will be in Aries, right? The new moon, the sun and moon come into a conjunction. And this morning on my broadcast, we were talking about this. And one of the other things that I noticed accidentally was that I pulled the chart for the day, and I always have all of these other planets and points and asteroids that are in there. When I'm doing a chart for the new moon or the full moon, I dumb it down a little bit because that's just a lot of noise, right? To see all these different things. Well, I'd forgotten to do that when I pulled the new moon chart. So I saw this asteroid named Metis that was conjunct the sun and the moon during the new moon. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, that can't be a mistake. Somebody wanted me to see that. So then I
Mm-hmm.
started looking at the mythology of Metis, and she's a wisdom goddess. And she, in reading the myth, I mean, she ends up, this is a Zeus myth, Zeus, who's Jupiter myth, right? She ends up being swallowed by Jupiter because Jupiter is trying to shut her up. He's trying to, he doesn't want to hear her wisdom anymore. So she ends up embedded in his brain, in his mind. So she's always there. Now she has a direct conduit line directly into his mind. So she's always chattering at him about what's the wise move, what's the next wise step to take. And I thought that's too funny that, she's involved with this as we're transforming what's buzzing in your brain, right? What's buzzing in your mind about what to do, about who you want to be, about what you need to change, about what you need to leave be, about you name it, right? You name it. So I just find that so funny. It was like ironic almost that I was trying I almost always delete her out of the pantheon because it's just too much. She gets left in arbitrarily and then has a major role to play. So more coming on that as I learn more about her mythology, and yet she does represent wisdom. We could all use a
Mm,
dose of that, right? Wisdom.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then we skip a day, we have a moment to breathe, and then the very next day, Pluto, planet of transformation, who was conjunct who was in a sextile to the sun on the spring or fall equinox, is now moving into Aquarius for the first time in 248 years,
Oh,
right? Nobody living right now has ever experienced that energy. Countries have, but not people, right? So we are now going to be in the front row of a major Aquarian transformation that begins that day, but will unfold over the next 20 years. Pluto in Aquarius is responsible for revolutions. The American Revolution was fought during Pluto in Aquarius. The French Revolution was fought. I think both French revolutions were fought with Pluto in Aquarius.
so we
So
look
there's
forward to a revolution.
Well, we are in a revolution, don't you think? Right?
Yes.
Maybe it's
Yes.
not one
Yes.
about territory or goods or as because it's not we don't have we don't have the Jupiter Saturn conjunctions in earth signs like we did at that time, but we do have now Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions in air. So it really turns us more to um the cyber world or technology world. But I thought it was kind of funny that, here in the US, we had that whole Chinese balloon thing. Who knows if the balloon was really floating over the country from China or what it was? We don't know. Or if they know, they're never going to tell us the truth about it anyway. So
Mm,
we just
mm,
have to assume it is a
that's
message to us about the age of air and how war might play out in a technologically advanced sort of way. I
mhm.
don't know what that means for us going forward, but remember, Pluto is always about revolution and transformation, and Aquarius is always about revolution and transformation going together. So I think he's going to signal a time where we see a lot of issues around technology and um, questions around the use of technology, the right use of technology, what would constitute a wrong use of technology. Um, Definitely reminds me of movies like The Terminator, where AI goes live, right, and becomes conscious and sentient and decides that humanity is a weakness on the planet and sets out to destroy us. You just can't help but see like that futuristic thing that happened. That was a movie from 19, what, 80, 82, 83, something like that. And here we are, just 40 years hence, dealing facing the fact that this is going to be a deal. This is going to be a thing.
Mm,
I mean, every day you turn around, there's a new AI, there's a new, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and all of this kind of thing that we're going to have to work with. We're going to have to, we're going to have to define new limits and new boundaries around that. That's
mhm,
going to be fun, right?
mm,
And this is really the remaking of society from the ground up, right? In the age of Capricorn, with Pluto and Capricorn, what we saw was a lot of destruction in our systems and institutions that we trusted, that we held our faith in, and they let us down, right? From the banks to the mortgage companies
mm,
to the stock market to corporations to the medical field to governments and on, all those things that we'd always taken for the transportation. being able to get goods. Whoever thought that you would have empty store shelves in the United States? I mean, I never would have thought that. But transportation, these are systems that are being exposed for the weaknesses that they're holding. So in a way, Pluto's marking this changeover where we have to really look at things in a completely different way. So remaking society in a more humanistic way,
About
humanitarian
time.
way, right? But the big question is about how do we tease out that modern way the future needs to be when we're holding fast to old patterns and the
Mm.
old world, right? You know, I noticed this when Trump was running for president. It was all about make America great again. So it's like representation of holding on teeth and nails to something, an older ideal, maybe, or and the way things used to be. But you can't take that and move that forward, not with the force of these transits that are happening. It isn't going to work, right? It just isn't. So we're going to have to find, you know, maybe imaginative, radically different solutions to the problems that we face, not just in the US, but all around the world, on the
Mm.
planet in general, right? The idea of global warming, if that's a reality and not just something people have made up, and it certainly seems to be bearing out that the planet is warmer and glaciers are melting and sea rise is possible and all of that, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to just hide our heads in the sands blaming people? Or are we going to actually take steps and do something? So that's the potential. It's the old no longer being able to hold. It just won't hold, right? It's going to have to be ideas that take us from all walks of life, all different countries, all different ways of thinking, and we're going to have to adopt a whole new way of being. So that's Pluto. And Pluto's only going to stay at the 0 degree of Aquarius, and then he's retrograding back to Capricorn, right? We need to still look at the destruction that has been in our systems so that we can really get a bead on what is it that we need to do to rebuild or to build something new.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big day. That's a big day. But again, it's not just the day, right? We've already been living this thing out a little bit because Saturn's been in Aquarius before he moved into Pisces.
Right.
The fact that Saturn leaves Aquarius just before Pluto moves into Aquarius, I couldn't go back in time and find whenever that had happened before. I'm sure it's somewhere, maybe. And especially moving that closely together, right? In the same month, in the same 2 week period of time, right? That's kind of crazy. And then finally on the 25th, Mars is going to move out of Gemini, where he's been since last August, and move into the sign of Cancer. Now, he's not a particularly happy camper in Cancer, right? He's a fire planet, a fire sign ruled planet or ruling planet that's now moving into water and into a very emotionally driven planetary placement. Moon rules Cancer. So he's not particularly happy there, but I think maybe for the short term, his transit through Cancer reminds us of goals like making sure everybody has enough to eat, making sure that the weakest links are nurtured, making sure our children are being educated, that they're clothed, that they're housed. A lot of homeless stuff will probably start to come up as Mars moves into Cancer. No solutions. I don't find any solutions yet for that problem. But it will certainly take front and center, right? There's going to be a lot of talk around how do we nurture people? How do we take care of people? Should we take care of people, or should we just let them dangle out there and take care of themselves? Because by God, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. So shouldn't everybody be able to? That's a dangerous, slippery slope, right? Because again, we're all in this together. And just because I had the tools and the ability to pull myself up and do something doesn't mean that everybody should do it the way that I did it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are the safety nets? I think that also comes up. What are the safety nets? In our country, it's Social Security, it's welfare, it's food stamps or food, whatever they call it now. Um, those are safety nets that are there for the elderly and for children and for families.
Right.
And there are probably others that I'm not even thinking about that will likely be issues that come up as Mars moves through Cancer. But that's only one little piece of the puzzle because the bigger picture is very humanitarian with Pluto moving into Aquarius. How do we see that all people really have access to what they need to thrive and not just literally survive?
Mm-hmm.
Big questions. That does not have an easy answer, by the way. There isn't any easy answer. Are the people who say they should do it themselves right? Well, yeah, in some ways, right? We're each responsible. We're each divine and have access to everything we need to do what we want to do. But sometimes the decks are stacked against people, right? Just by culture or by race or by skin color, right? All of that, it's complex, right? It's complex. It's not so easy. So that's Mars. And then he moves on into Leo and he'll make his rounds. He makes it all the way through Sagittarius this year, but or up to Sagittarius. But at least he'll be out of Gemini. So those of us who are Geminis or have, Gemini prominent in our charts will stop being dogged by Mars. Yay. Now, funny thing, the following week, the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, comes into a conjunction with Jupiter while the moon is in Gemini. So we're not quite done yet with the whole thing about communication and about our minds and about what are we teaching and about how are we communicating with one another, or is there a lack of communication with one another? We start the last week of March with that kind of up in the air. But hopefully in a way that we can start to make some key decisions because it's a conjunction to Jupiter. We have some optimism in the end of the month as well about all of these things that have been going on through that whole month and
Mm-hmm.
what we could possibly make with all of that. What can we do with all of that? And then the last day, not the last day of the month, but the last day of major transits is the 30th. And that is Mars in a trine to Saturn and Venus in a conjunction to Uranus. And I think there might be some surprises at the end of March, and I hope they're good surprises. Venus
Yeah.
involved again, remember it was Jupiter and Venus in the beginning of the month, and at the end of the month, it's Venus and Uranus. It's a possibility that we have some brilliance, some genius ideas, something revolutionary that can happen. That's what I'm holding out hope for, right? That people will take responsibility for themselves. They will see the light of humanity and what does it mean to be a human, to be humane, and what does it mean to love one another, to hold ourselves to a higher spiritual authority, to live as if we were divinely guided. I don't know how it gets any better than this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, one other thing. On the 15th of March, Jupiter, again, the planet of growth and expansion, there's optimism here, finds himself in our human designs at gate 51, which is the gate of shock and awakening. Literally, it begins a process of an initiation or, initiating some kind of higher spiritual, a move to our higher selves. Now, a lot of people out there are spiritual, and a lot of us, we're very comfortable with our higher selves. But there's a good chunk of our population, Annette, they don't even have a concept of what that means, right? They're looking outside of themselves for answers, right? They're looking to others for guidance.
Mm.
They're looking to God or religion, again, outside of themselves for guidance. This is the real opportunity, is that you are complete, you are whole, you have everything you need. You
Mm.
have a deep well of wisdom that remains untapped, and initiate yourself into utilizing your higher wisdom. Now, for some people, that may be a shock that happens in their lives, shocking events in the world, like 9/11 shocked the world, not only the US, but shocked the world. And for a while, what did we do? We all came together, right? We all There was a spirit of humanity that went through the world. But why does it always have to be a disaster,
Mm.
right? Why does it have to be a 7.8 earthquake that literally flattens a good chunk of Turkey before we come back to our higher selves? So the opportunity is to initiate ourselves into being more spiritual, being more connected, if we to one another, as well as to our higher spirituality, source, God, whatever you want to call that. But the low side is it's going to take something shocking that wakes people up. So for, March 15th through I think about the 15th of April, we have that potential for shocking events, shocking things, both personally in our lives, but also in the bigger, wider world that wake us up to some other reality. Um, and I don't say that to be fearful or to, proffer any kind of fear field. It just happens that way. But that's where we do our best when we're sort of the last hurrah kind of situation, and we pass a Hail Mary and we win the game. Um, it doesn't have to be that way, but often it is. So be thinking about that in your own life. What are you needing to wake up to?
Mm.
What are the subtle hints that you're already getting that turn into head slams if you ignore them, right? So that's a big deal for a kind of subsurface energy that's driving March. There's layers. I told you, I think it behind the scenes, it's layers. March of layers, layers and layers.
Well, I've just had a very pleasant surprise, Janet, because of our dear friend Alicia has joined us and said, "Hello, beautiful ladies."
Hello.
Hello. Now, so really, March is incredible, and we need to remember the 15th especially.
Well, the 7th,
See what
the
it brings.
15th, and the 23rd, 20th. I mean, every day. Be present. Be present to the energies every day, because every day is going to bring us a new experience, perhaps, or something new, bring something new to the table. Um, Potential, right? It's high potential, but I'm afraid a lot of people will take it and be in conflict and will shut themselves down, or will see it as it through fear, right? The fear lens. So if we
Right.
can release ourselves from fear, remember I said that's the wall. The main wall that needs to come down with
Mm.
Saturn's move into Pisces is fear. The fear of the other, the fear of what others, want to do, or the fear of what happens if we work together and cooperate. Oh my God, wouldn't that be awesome?
Mm.
A fear that I'm not going to get my just desserts if I, give into your seeing things through your eyes. It's a trippy thing, and yet it's possible, right? We are on our way, people, to a golden age. It might not come in
Yes.
our lifetimes, but we're on our way there.
Mm.
But we're the creators of it, so we might as well start setting the template. What do we want to be? How, if you imagined utopia, if you were like John Lennon and could
Mm.
imagine all the people living life free, right? What would that look like? That's what we need to hold, that vision in our minds, right? John Lennon was so ahead of his time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But he said it, right?
Absolutely.
We're
It's
the,
a
we're the ones.
brilliant song. Imagine.
Hmm. Imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine everybody living in peace. Imagine everybody going to bed with full bellies and roofs over their head if they want them. And
Mm.
it strains credulity that we don't have that right now, because it's attainable there.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, Janet, through this session, your website has been up there on the screen,
I drop my head a little.
www.living-astrology.com. So if
Uh-huh.
people would like to reach out to you, that's how they do it.
Yep, that's how they do it. And here's the thing, I've started for this year, I started doing a weekly newsletter And if you go to my website and you request a free chart, either astrology or human design, you can be added to the newsletter list and start receiving this beautiful information each week about what's happening in the stars. You can be forewarned, forearmed, in the know. So um, it is, it's free.
Fantastic.
It's free information. All you have to do is give me your email address, and I'll even send you a chart if that's what you want, a report about who you are. So yes, go to my website. That it's very clear there about what to do, right, to get a free chart. And that's the start of it. You got to know yourself. You got to know who
Mm,
you are. And then,
exactly.
see your beauty. And then you start to see everybody else's beauty. That's the key.
Well, what a fabulous note to end the show on. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Janet. Thank
You are
you
most
to our
welcome.
audience. And let's put our best foot forward and enjoy the madness of March.
March mayhem.
Yes, indeed. And
Yeah.
Janet, you and I will be back in a month's time. It'll be interesting to review, won't it, what was going on in March.
Yeah. So it looks like, Annette, we'll be back on my April 5th and your April 6th. Is that right? Because the first
But,
falls on like a Saturday or something. So
yes, that's right. Yes. So
yeah,
that's exactly right. And
yeah.
it's the day, well, for me, the day before Good Friday, the eve of Easter. So that'll be interesting too.
Yes, it will. And
Mm.
also, I think we will be at a different time then because we'll have gone an hour ahead.
And we will have gone back. So good point. That will be it. All right.
I
We'll
think
have
we'll
to
be at
check
4
the
o'clock.
world
4
time.
p.m. Yeah. Just expect us to have a different time than today. Today was at 3 p.m. West Coast time, West Coast of the USA time.
Yeah, my
Uh,
time will stay the same for Melbourne because of the way it is in Australia. Brisbane doesn't change, but for you, yes. For
yeah,
people in the States, well, and elsewhere, it
will be
yeah,
4
it'll be a
p.m. I think.
change. I
Yeah.
think so. Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
at some point we always end up at 5 p.m. So I don't know. We'll make sure to let everybody know when to
Yeah.
catch us,
That's
and
exactly right. Yeah,
it'll
you're
probably
right.
be a different
Maybe
time.
because of the way it is this time, maybe it will go straight to the 5 p.m. Who knows? If you change your time at the beginning of April,
We
and
change next week. We change in March.
oh, right, okay, and we
Yeah.
change at the beginning of April, so therefore it might well be 5 p.m. by then. But
Yeah.
as you
We'll
say,
just see.
Janet, we will let people know.
Yep. We'll keep you all posted on how to find us, when to find us, where to find us. All right.
A little exercise for us.
Right.
Okay. Much
Right.
love, everybody. Have a
I thank you,
wonderful,
Annette.
wonderful rest of the time. Bye
Bye for
bye.
now.